kind of a good feel for that? They just want practice, or how?
Yeah, you try to have a feel for that. Today you have science. We monitor their heart rates and the load of the week. It's actually pretty impressive, and we tried to manage it the best we could. And there's also that balance of how important practice is, and maybe where we're at as a team, that Monday practice where we went pretty long might be two steps forward for maybe a step back in the game. Right now, maybe where we're at. Is that exact? Is it going to be like that all the time? Maybe not, but there might be some times like that where maybe where we are as an organization, at times you really have to value practice. Now, is that the reason? I don't know. Funky back-to-back, just the Toronto back-to-back sneaky in that you play Friday night, you got to go through customs. We don't get into Toronto. We literally got into the hotel at 2:30. And then we play them, and then we get stuck on this side on customs. We don't get back to Detroit till 2:33 in the morning. So that's an excuse. Everyone goes through it. There's a lot of reasons that went into us not performing great with our 5-on-5 play. As a coach, you kind of look at everything, but the bottom line is we didn't have very good performance. We didn't execute very well. Some nights like that, it feels like things weren't going your way or playing well, and you watch the tape back over and you weren't that bad. That was not the case in this one. Watching the tape back over this morning was just as uncomfortable as it felt. Now, with that said, we scored some hard-earned goals. We'll never apologize for 2 points in this league, how hard it is, especially against a really good team that was on a 5-game winning streak. And again, we certainly probably deserve better with those 3 previous losses. So a lot goes into it. You're always evaluating how you can do things better, but we weren't very good for a lot of reasons last night.
Derek, you saw Moritz last season from the opposing bench, but when you came into this season, do you recall, what did you and Bob Buchner see as his potential and what he needed to do to become a really well-rounded defenseman?
I think well-rounded is the good way to put it. Manage his game better, avoid those turnovers. At times, from seeing him from afar, he's obviously had a presence but looked chaotic at times. And I just think he's had a good presence about himself. He loves the challenge of those matchups. I think he's at his best when he's physically engaged. And again, 21-year-old, we ask a ton of him. And I know a lot's been made of maybe his point production being down from last year. But I think when you look back at his development, where we need him to be or want him to be, he's definitely taking strides in the right direction.
Do you look at plus minus as a coach, or do you look at
a little
video
bit?
And
that's a great question, because I think that old school plus minus is getting pushed out of the way a little bit on those underlying numbers. For me, I really value chances for and chances against. Sometimes you get a really good read on where that's at more than the plus minus. I do think if those numbers are really high in both ends, I think there is something to that, but there's a lot that goes into the plus minus. I think today's day and age of those underlying analytics, you can look past a little bit of the actual hard plus minus.
Derek, going back to the practice thing, I don't think we've reached it yet probably, but when do you feel you reach the dog days of the season? Do you feel like games 50, 60?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think they hit at different times. I think you hit different momentums at different times. We just talked about how we were dragging last night, and you saw practice. The boys were flying. We won. There's something about momentum and energy. There's some excitement. So I think a lot goes into it. When does that hit? I think it's different for different times. There's different parts in the schedule that make it more difficult. So, I certainly don't feel that now. With that said, it was just one of those games last night when everyone saw it. I'm sure even you guys were like, what's going on? This isn't the team we've shown of late. And again, maybe a little bit of credit to a very good Winnipeg team.
How do you grind through that? Is that just a mental thing?
Yeah, I think so. You asked the guys, you could feel it. At first wasn't bad, and we get out at 3-1. Didn't feel great at the end, but you could feel it in the second. But we still had a 2-goal lead going into the third. And, I wouldn't say you address it, but you kind of, here we are, 2-goal lead. What an opportunity. Let's go get it. And they scored 29 seconds in. So I give our guys credit. I thought they dug in fairly well. Obviously, that 6th goal was important. And we definitely, there was a hang-on feel to it. But, I will say we defended the goalie pull pretty well. I thought our structure and that was pretty good, and we ended up getting the open netter to seal it.
Was putting Wallman with Moritz something you thought about before Wallman came back, or kind of had
No,
or something
that was Wallman's play warranted that. The eye test was there. His underlying numbers were there. There's some nights we leave there. He feels like he's one of our better defensemen, so it's just natural. Good play, increased role, and we put him in that top 2 pair. And he was good last. Obviously, the goal was world class. He was great. We asked a ton of him last night, but he found himself in some of those D-zone mishaps, lost battles, lost races, like most of our team did last night.
Are you going back to Village tomorrow? Or?
Yep, we're going to go back with Billy tomorrow, yes.
So he's had a good rest after, because that was as many...
He has, yes. He did. It was a weird game because it was probably 3 goals. Even the first goal, it's a wrister from the point. But the poor guy was in his crouch for the entire 2 minutes before that. So, we were joking. Of course, he got out of his crouch. He wanted to get a break, and unfortunately, it was sarcastically. That's when they shot it. That we don't want to put those games on our goalies, especially we want to get games out of them. We were talking about potentially playing him in that back-to-back last week because he had very little volume in the previous games. And that was not the case last night. That was a hard game on our goalie, and obviously he did great with it.
One or two kind of models for how you see Sider, how you kind of confident about what you do?
No, I don't think so. I think there's an everyday process in his development. You got to give him credit. We have the skating coach today. He was one of those guys with high minutes that we didn't have, wasn't mandatory for him to use a skating coach, and he asked for pre-ice skating coach. And it's almost great, but we want to be careful. But that's a credit to who he is. You saw how we played last night. The minutes. We're talking about our team looking tired. We had design practice today, 30 minutes. Some guys had to use the skating coach or skills after mandatory. We gave 8 to 9 guys the option to get off the ice, and he was one of them. He actually took on his own the skating coach early. So it's credit to him. He wants those to develop. He knows he's in a process of developing. But no, it's more of an everyday video, things we're working on. Even the offense last night, we've been working on him walking the line, using some deception before scoring, and that 5-on-3 goal, that was a great. It's really neat to see things in practice that we're trying to grow him in. And he walks that line, he freezes everyone, pass over to Dylan, he finishes, important goal. You need to score in that 5-on-3. So good on him.
Because of the size and some of the skill, do you see a little Hedman in him?
I've gotten that question a lot. Obviously, righty lefty, had the luxury of spending 4 years with Victor. Of course, there's going to be some comparisons because it's a really talented player at a young age, and people see Victor as an elite on his way to the Hall of Fame type D-man right now, but he had his struggles before I even got there in the league. They talked about it a lot, and it's probably an experience for me in developing. I get to Tampa, he's still growing, but he's more of a finished product. But the way John Cooper, Rick Bowness, some of these guys talked about how raw he was as a young D-man, of course, I think you would see some comparisons there, but a little bit different. And boy, if he ever obviously got to that, it would be great for obviously him and the organization.
What stands out to you about Wallman's skating?
What's that?
About Wallman's skating.
That's one of his attributes. the way first two strides, the way he can close, the way he can get up on a play, he can escape forechecks and one-on-one battles with his skating. So, I think for Wallman, he's always had those physical tools, and again, it's a small sample size, but now he's starting to put a lot of it together. And now we're going to ask some consistency out of him, hold him accountable to a standard he's played of late, and hopefully keep growing.
Tomorrow when you go in optional, I'm curious, as a coaching philosophy, is it just optional on the ice, optional come to the rink? Like, what's kind of the balance?
No, everyone comes, we get focused. A morning like that, our morning meeting is vitally important. We start looking at our opponent, maybe look back. Today, obviously, within our meeting today was a lot of the defensive side. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the positive on the offensive side in the morning and start prepping. But everyone will come. It's an interesting group. We've probably only had a handful of optional skates all year for a morning skate. People are different. Tampa, we 70% of the time we're optional morning skates. Here, where this team is, the youth of it, sometimes, we like those touches because there's still a development aspect of maybe some of those morning touches. And we had one a couple weeks ago, and all but 4 guys, took it off. So it's just tough to read. Sometimes you get a feel of those optionals of how many guys actually go out to get a feel of where they're at. But yeah, it'll be an optional skate, but everyone will be here. We'll have a process in the morning.
Do you sometimes almost have to instruct young guys that it actually is optional?
Yeah, but sometimes, but you actually want them. Maybe that's a little old school, but you want those guys to get in the habit of touches and work ethic. But of course, sometimes, Mo's one of those guys. A perfect example. We've been asking a lot of him. We expected 30 minutes, 35 minutes out of him today, and he goes and grabs a skating coach for 15 more. So, there's a balance in there sometime. I had one experience in Andre Vasilevsky. That's all he wanted was reps, hard. We had to pull him back. Just part of his development on that side, his growth, especially with how much we played him. So I think there's a little balance of that, but I think you want to push those young guys out of their comfort level a little bit.
Is it easier to clean up after a game when it was such an abomination and they know how to play much better team defense?
Of course. It's so easy to clean up things when you win. It was a very hard meeting this morning, but the guys have, it's human nature. We've lost 3 in a row. We get a win. Guys are excited. So there's a good vibe to it. So, of course, at 100%.
Derek, I want to get back to Ted's point about dog days. And I'm making an assumption here, and I could be wrong, obviously, but is that where depth of a hockey club in a lineup really does come to the forefront during those?
It could be. It could be. That's a great point. Obviously, with today's day and age of cap, and obviously we're far from a cap team, not really us, but roster numbers, you may not have that luxury. But of course, we're sitting with, we sat out a very good player last night, and we probably will get him in. Maybe we'll use that extra body to hold guys a little more accountable, maybe get some of that fresh energy in. So possibly, yes, but it's hard to get there with the cap and roster numbers and injuries.
I'm curious. I know you said earlier in the season that you became a fan of Dan Campbell. Now that the Lions season is over, have you reached out?
Not yet. It's on. You'll laugh at me. Every post game, as I'm doing or during the game, my notes, I'll have between periods. One of the coaches will come down what I'm going to hit between periods. But I also one of my last notes is I'm start planning the next day, and it'll be like video, D-zone coverage, skating coach, practice. We got to do this in practice, wall work. Call Dan Campbell. They're like that. So I don't, who knows? I can just imagine how overwhelming their exits are. But I will get our people to reach out to their people and see if you'd have time. I'd like to maybe surprise the guys with it if it does, but we'll see. I hope that can happen.
Just one quick one for me. We talked to Kubalik in the locker room, and he said that he's focusing on some aspects of his game other than finding the score sheet.
Yes.
From a coach's perspective, what are those aspects that you want him looking at?
Great question, because he probably reflected the rest of our team last night. the one goal against Schmidt coming down the middle, that's his guy. That's his defensive blow up. A lot of people had their fingerprints on that one, but that one. He came back and it hurt him. That's why he's a good human, good teammate. He knew he screwed up. So he had third period, he had a couple chances to get pucks out. He didn't. Maybe some 50-50s that you may not see in other parts of the ice that gets us stuck in the D zone. So I think it's some of those areas. Now, with that said, he had one chance to score last night. He buries it. It was a really big goal. So I think we have a lot of guys in that same boat, and that's a credit to him and the person he is. He wants to have a more complete game.
What we're talking about, developing young defensive, what have the reports been on Edmondson and how things are?
So it's tough because you don't see him. I talked to Benny a lot, even more so lately, with obviously the players that have been down there on conditioning stints. And obviously we always ask about Simon. Obviously Steve gets to see him a ton, Sean Horkoff. But I think good. He battled through some illness early on, probably sent back a little bit. But it's just learning how to be a pro, consistency every day, bring it every day. Even you saw him at camp. He had a couple games in the preseason. He looked like he was ready to play every day in the National Hockey League. And then there's the next night, it looks like he's nowhere near ready to play. I just think that's of a young D-man. I personally think it's a lot harder as a D-man than a forward and that developing. So it's tough to give you an exact on where he's at, but there has been some positive reviews for sure.
You mentioned wanting to see, consistency from Johnson Berggren. Is that something, he's satisfied in the past few games?
Yeah, obviously. And he keeps making plays, Obviously, he's involved. Those first 2 goals, 4. But the Wallman goal, he made a battle forecheck play to keep the play alive that ends up in the back of the net, 20 seconds later. So, yeah, he still finds himself with some defensive miss, which is just, typical of a young guy. And, it's a hard ask of him. Him and Kopp have had some chemistry. But if you're playing with Andrew Kopp, you're getting top minutes versus top opponents. And that makes it very challenging. They were playing against Dubois last night. So it's a lot to ask of a young player, but yes, he's doing a lot of good things and progressing very well.